The moon glowed like a silent witness in the night sky, casting shadows across the village. Amina moved swiftly, her footsteps soft, but deliberate. The air was thick with the scent of incense, the smoke swirling in the cool breeze. She held the bottle tightly, its surface cold against her palm, the souls trapped inside swirling restlessly. No one dared approach the edge of the forest where she walked, not even the brave-hearted men of the village. Whispers had already begun to spread, but no one truly understood her power. She was a presence, both feared and respected. The night seemed to hold its breath as she disappeared into the darkness beyond the trees. Amina stood at the forest's edge, the fireflies drawn to her like moths to a flame. She raised the bottle high, and the fireflies gathered, their light flickering in the cool night air. The souls trapped inside the bottle stirred, the faintest glow beginning to pulse in, response to the fireflies' dance. The village trembled as they watched from the distance, unsure of whether to flee or to stay. A strange warmth seeped through the air, like a fever that could not be shaken. The fireflies circled, their glow growing brighter, each flicker pulling the souls closer. The village knew this moment, this ritual was something deeper than revenge. It was a curse, one that bound the past to the present. Word spread quickly through the village, carried by whispers and fearful glances. The old women gathered, murmuring in hushed tones. Some spoke of the curse that had followed Amina for years, while others wondered if she had summoned this magic herself, born of betrayal and vengeance. "She traps their souls," one elder said, her voice trembling. "The men who wronged her. Now they are the ones who suffer." But others disagreed. "It is the spirits of the past who guide her," another woman said, shaking her head. "Her magic is not of this world. She is cursed as the forest itself." The fireflies danced through the night sky, their light a silent witness. To the debate, fear and determination warred in Kwame's heart as he stood in the village center. The villagers gathered around him, urging him to stay away from Amina, to avoid the wrath of the spirits. But Kwame could not ignore the pull of curiosity that tugged at him. He had heard the stories, the rumors. He had seen the fireflies with his own eyes, their lights brighter than any star. He was young, brave, but afraid of what he might discover. Still, his duty as a protector of the people called him forward. "I will find out the truth," he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. The villagers watched, some hopeful, others skeptical. Only time would tell if his journey would end in salvation or destruction. Kwame spent days searching, asking the elders about the fireflies and their mysterious connection to Amina. The older generation spoke in riddles, their words heavy with secrets. "The fireflies are the spirits of the dead," one elder revealed. "They come when the land is in need of balance, and they guide the living to the truth." Kwame's heart raced with each new piece of information. He was learning that the spirits were not just vengeful. They were seeking justice, too. If Amina was truly connected to the spirits, then her actions were more than revenge. They were part of something ancient, a reckoning. Kwame could feel the weight of the truth pulling him deeper into the mystery, and he knew he had no choice but to follow. Amina's heart had always been a battlefield, torn between the love she once had and the betrayal that had shattered her. She had lost someone dear, and the pain of that loss had driven her into the arms of the spirits. The fireflies, now more than mere creatures of the night, were guides, messengers from the spirit world. Amina's vengeance was not born of hatred. It was the echo of a grief too deep to ignore. The fireflies whispered to her, reminding her of the promises broken and the heartache left behind. But as the souls swirled in the bottle, she began to question whether her quest for justice was turning her into the very thing she despised, a prisoner of her own pain. The villagers could not stop asking themselves, why these men? What had they done to deserve such a fate? They watched Amina, their suspicion growing. Was she punishing the wrong people? Or was there something more, something darker at play? Some believed Amina was simply a tool of the spirits, while others wondered if she had crafted this curse to control the village, to make them fear her. The men whose souls were trapped in the bottle were unknown to most, their identities shrouded in mystery. The curse had no clear pattern, just a string of whispered rumors and unanswered questions. But Kwame, driven by his need for answers, couldn't shake the feeling that the truth was far more complicated than anyone could imagine. Kwame set out early one morning, his heart determined, but his mind clouded with doubt. The village was silent as he left, the weight of the mystery pressing on his shoulders. He had to know the truth, no matter the cost. As he ventured into the forest, the shadows seemed to stretch longer, the silence more oppressive. The deeper he traveled, the more he sensed that Amina's power was not something he could easily understand. There was something ancient and terrible at work, and the further he went, the more he realized how little he truly knew. The fireflies' dance had begun, and he was walking into the heart of the storm. Kwame could feel the air thicken as he neared the clearing. A strange sense of dread gripped him, as though something terrible was about to unfold. In the distance, he saw Amina standing with the bottle, her figure silhouetted against the moonlit sky. The fireflies danced around her like a halo, their light flickering ominously. Kwame's pulse quickened as he approached, his heart pounding in his chest. He had come for answers, but he wondered if the truth would be more than he could bear. The moment of confrontation had arrived. He could feel it in the air. The truth was about to be revealed, and with it, the fate of the village would be sealed. Once, Amina was the village's most trusted healer, her hands capable of easing pain and curing sickness. But one betrayal, one act of deceit, shattered her life. Her eyes, once bright and full of hope, now reflected only sorrow and a thirst for vengeance. She walked among the people, but they avoided her, sensing the dark aura that surrounded her. Her heart, heavy with grief, had been hardened by loss. The woman who once brought life now carried death in her spirit. The villagers whispered behind, closed doors, their once reverent gazes now filled with fear and disdain. Kwame's complicated mission. Kwame, young and eager, felt the weight of his father's shadow press upon him. His father, an elder of the village, had spoken little about Amina's past, but every silence spoke volumes. He had heard the stories, the whispers, but something within him tugged at his heart, a curiosity, a need to know. Was Amina truly the monster they feared? Or was there more to her tale? His mission was clear: uncover the truth. Yet with every step he took, doubt clouded his purpose. He had to balance duty with his own hunger for answers. Was he doing this for the village, or for himself? The village lived in harmony with the spirits of the land, each day marked by rituals that honored the ancestors. The fireflies were sacred, their light guiding the living and the dead alike. The rivers carried secrets, the trees whispered truths, and the earth held the stories of all who had passed. The villagers respected the natural order and the balance of life, death, and rebirth. But now, the rituals were no longer comforting. They had become warnings. The spirits, it seemed, had turned their gaze to Amina, and the village was caught in the tide of something far darker than they had ever known. The fireflies, small and delicate, were no ordinary creatures. To the villagers, they were the embodiment of life's fleeting nature. They carried the souls of the departed, guiding them to their rest, but they also held the power to reflect the past and reveal the future. On dark nights, when the air was thick with mystery, the fireflies would gather, their glow illuminating the path of the living and the dead. But when Amina called them, their light was not gentle. It flickered like a warning, like a flame that would not burn out, drawing the souls of the cursed into her bottle. The bottle, crafted from the bones of an ancient tree, pulsed with a dark energy. It was said that the forest spirits had once blessed it, but now it carried a curse. Inside it, the souls of the wronged and the wicked swirled, trapped in eternal torment. Amina, holding the bottle close to her chest, would call upon the fireflies to do her bidding, their tiny bodies carrying the souls into the bottle's depths. Each soul added to the bottle made her stronger, but with each soul came a price. A part of her humanity slowly eroded, the darkness seeping deeper into her being. She had traded her own peace for vengeance, and now there was no turning back. The bottle was not just a tool of power. It was the embodiment of her pain. Amina had once been betrayed by those she loved, those she had healed. They had turned on her, driven by jealousy, fear, or greed. The pain of that betrayal had driven her to the spirits for justice, and the curse of the bottle had bound her to an eternal fate of revenge. Each soul she captured fed her power, but the curse grew stronger, pulling her deeper into the forest's darkness. She had become more than a healer, more than a woman seeking justice. She had become the embodiment of vengeance itself. Kwame's journey was not an easy one. As he walked the path of knowledge, each step led him deeper into the mystery of Amina's curse. The villagers spoke in riddles, and every answer seemed to create more questions. The bottle. What did it mean? Why had Amina chosen to trap the souls of those she had healed? Why had the village allowed her to carry such power? Kwame's fear grew with each passing day. The curse that had consumed Amina was not something to be taken lightly, and yet he could not turn back. He had to know the truth, for only then could he hope to end the torment that had plagued his people for so long. The forest was alive with whispers, the voices of the spirits that roamed its depths. Some spoke of vengeance, others of sorrow, but all carried a warning. The deeper Kwame ventured, the more the forest seemed to hold him in its grip. The spirits were restless, as though Amina's actions had disturbed their peace. There were those who spoke of a great power hidden deep within the forest, a power that could end the curse, but no one who had sought it had ever returned. Kwame pressed on, driven by a force he could not explain, his heart heavy with the knowledge that he might be walking into a trap. The truth of Amina's power was not one of glory. It was a burden, a curse she had taken on willingly, but one that had consumed her. As the souls gathered in her bottle, her body grew weaker, her mind darker. The power she wielded was not without cost. She had lost herself in the pursuit of justice, and now the forest spirits whispered to her, calling her to a fate from which there was no escape. The curse had taken its toll. Amina had become a shadow of her former self, and the price of vengeance had drained her spirit. But she could not stop. She was bound to the bottle, and it would be her undoing. The first time Kwame came face with Amina, the air around them crackled with energy. The fireflies danced wildly, their light brighter than ever before, as though they were part of the very magic that swirled between them. Kwame could feel the weight of the curse, the darkness that had overtaken Amina's soul. She was no longer the healer he had heard of as a child. She was something else, something born of grief and wrath. The fireflies seemed to hiss around them, as though they were alive with anger. Kwame, trembling but resolute, faced her, ready to learn the truth, no matter the cost. As the power of Amina spread, the village began to crumble. People no longer spoke openly of the old ways, and fear replaced respect for the spirits. The village, once a place of harmony, was now torn by suspicion and dread. The elders too felt the weight of Amina's curse. They had failed to protect the village from the darkness she had brought, and now they feared for their lives, their souls. The village's unity was threatened, and each day that passed without resolution brought them closer to ruin. Kwame stood at the heart of the village, the weight of his decision heavy upon him. He had learned the truth of Amina's curse, but was he ready to end it? The power she wielded was immense, and the fireflies, ever present, flickered as though waiting for his choice. To fight Amina was to risk everything: his life, his village, his soul. But to let her continue her quest for vengeance was to condemn them all to darkness. In that moment, Kwame realized that his next action would decide not just his fate, but the future of everyone he loved. Would he choose destruction, or would he find a way to save Amina from the very curse that had claimed her? Amina stood tall, her presence radiating a strange mix of power and sorrow. In her hand, a small bottle shimmered with an eerie glow. The faintest flicker of light danced inside, like a trapped star struggling to escape. Kwame's eyes locked onto the bottle, his heart pounding as if it might burst. "What is that? What have you done?" he asked, his voice hoarse, fighting to stay steady. Amina's lips curled into a cold smile, her eyes dark with the weight of her revelation. "This bottle holds more than just power, Kwame. It holds your father's soul." The words hung in the air, thick with horror. Kwame's body stiffened. His father, his strong, wise father, trapped inside that tiny vessel, his father's essence, bound forever. Amina stepped closer, her expression unreadable. "He never told you, did he? The truth of his betrayal, the price he paid for his choices. But now, his soul is mine, and you must decide. Take his place, or leave him in eternal torment." A surge of anger and despair collided inside Kwame. His father, a man he'd idolized, reduced to nothing more than a prisoner in a bottle. His mind spun, torn between the pull of family loyalty and his duty to the village that trusted him. The path before him was a long, dark one, and no matter which way he stepped, he knew the cost would be immense. Amina's gaze never wavered as she spoke again, her voice tinged with finality. "You stand at the crossroads, Kwame. Love your father enough to set him free or forsake him, and let me keep his soul. But know this, if you take his place, you lose yourself, just as I have lost myself. A life for a life, Kwame. That's the only way." Kwame clenched his fists. "You think I'd let you turn me into something like you? You think I'd ever abandon my people for your twisted revenge?" His words crackled with emotion, yet inside him, a deeper storm raged. Amina laughed bitterly, her eyes darkened with the weight of her history. "You don't understand. This isn't about vengeance anymore, Kwame. It's about survival. You cannot imagine what it's like to give everything for love, only to be discarded when you are most vulnerable. This," she gestured to herself, "this is all that's left." Kwame felt a sharp pang in his chest. Her words struck too close to the truth, to the pain she had endured. His mind, however, fought to stay sharp. "You were loved, Amina. The village loved you. What happened?" Kwame's mind reeled as he began to understand the weight of Amina's curse. The fireflies, those glowing creatures that danced around her, whispering of power, were not just a symbol of light. They were the source of her magic, the very force that had taken her soul and twisted it. Kwame recalled stories from his childhood, whispered warnings of those who dabbled in forbidden magic, of souls being slowly consumed by their own desires. The fireflies, They've been feeding on your soul, haven't they? Each day, each moment, they drain you. They make you something less. Amina's eyes flashed, her voice low and filled with fury. And what? You think I don't know? I've seen the light dim inside me, seen the fireflies burn brighter as I wither. But it's too late now. The magic is mine, and with it, I will make the world pay. Kwame's heart raced. He had seen it too. The fireflies' glow had once been ethereal, a sign of hope. Now they were a death sentence, feeding off Amina's grief, leaving her hollow. Kwame's internal storm raged. How could he choose between saving his father and stopping the destruction that Amina was bringing upon the village? Each decision carried its own sacrifice. If I free him, Amina, Kwame's voice cracked, I'll become like you. I'll lose myself just as you did. I won't be able to save the village. But if I leave him, I condemn you both. Amina's voice was barely a whisper, but it sliced through the tension. You already know the answer, Kwame. I never asked for this, but neither did you. Kwame staggered back, the weight of her words sinking deep. His heart, already torn between love and duty, now faced the unbearable truth that to save anyone, someone would have to suffer. Amina's tone softened, her eyes distant as if speaking to a ghost. You see, Kwame, you think this is about revenge, but it's not. It's about what I lost, what you never understood. It's about loving so deeply, so fiercely, that the world shatters when it abandons you. What I became was the price I had to pay for that love. Kwame stood frozen, her words cutting deeper than anything he had ever heard. His hands trembled as he looked at the bottle that held his father's soul. How could he fight a battle when both sides seemed to have lost? Kwame's breath came in sharp bursts, his frustration and fear rising. Look at yourself, Amina. You were once whole. What's left of you now? The magic has eaten you from the inside. This isn't living. At what cost, Amina? At what cost? Amina's face twisted with bitterness. At the cost of everything I was. But it was worth it. Worth the power, the control. Nothing else matters now. Kwame could see it clearly now. The destruction of a person's soul, the slow erosion of everything that once made them human. But what could he do? His mind was in chaos, the pieces of his choices slipping through his fingers like sand. Kwame's heart thudded in his chest. He had to act. There was no other way. The fireflies, the magic, the curse. It all came down to a single moment, a single decision. I won't let you destroy yourself, Amina. I won't let this cycle of pain continue. There must be another way, Kwame said, his voice stronger, now more determined. Amina's eyes darkened, the fireflies around her growing brighter, more intense. You can't stop me, Kwame. I am beyond saving. But you still have time. If you want to save your father, if you want to stop me, you'll have to choose. And that choice will destroy everything. Kwame's fists clenched, his mind whirling. His heart broke for Amina, for the woman she had been. But in the end, his duty to the village, to the people who trusted him, had to come first. Amina's voice was barely a whisper now, the power of the fireflies dimming around her. You think you know what's best, Kwame, but you'll never understand what it's like to lose everything. The glow around her faded, and for the briefest moment, Kwame saw the woman she once was, a woman full of life and love. But it was too late. The fireflies had consumed her, and now she was a shadow of herself, with his heart heavy and his resolve Steeled, Kwame made his choice. The battle would be over, one way or another. He had no idea how it would end, but he knew this. The village's future and his own fate rested on the decision he was about to make. In the final heart-stopping moment, Kwame faced Amina one last time. The bottle in his hand, the fireflies buzzing fiercely around them, the weight of the world pressing down. His next move would change everything. Kwame stood at the edge of the clearing, where the village's heartbeat pulsed, where the air itself felt heavy with the burden of the decision he had to make. His heart thudded against his chest as Amina's pain-filled eyes locked with his. Her soul, once vibrant, was now a shadow in the bottle, consumed by years of vengeance. He could feel the weight of his ancestors pressing upon him. To release her would mean her soul's freedom, and possibly her redemption. But to free her was also to set loose a power he could not control. The spirits, restless, stirred as his fingers hovered near the bottle. It was his choice, his alone, but with it came the power to rewrite destiny. "What will you do?" Amina whispered, her voice like the wind that echoed across the land. She didn't have to say more. The desperation was clear in her voice, the hunger for freedom. And yet, there was something else, something darker. His thoughts flickered to his father's face, his deeds, his crimes. Could he ever forgive the man who had forsaken the village? Kwame's hands trembled as he stepped back, the weight of the bottle now too much to bear. His choice wasn't just for Amina. It was for all the villagers, for the future, for his ancestors. His father's soul, trapped for eternity, could not be freed without consequences. The spirits were clear. They demanded balance. "I can't save you, Amina," he whispered, "not at the cost of my people." The moment Kwame spoke, the air grew still. Amina's face crumpled in anguish, as though the very earth beneath her feet had cracked open. She had known it was coming, but to hear it from him, her final hope dashed. It was unbearable. Her soul was tethered to that bottle, her body slowly withering away as the vengeance she sought consumed her. The magic of the fireflies, the force she had used to bind her father's spirit, now it was her torment. The villagers had gathered in their homes, watching from afar, waiting for the consequence of Kwame's choice. The silence stretched long into the night, but the curse had already begun to work its twisted path. Amina's body began to shake, her once strong limbs trembling as though the very magic was eating her from within. She looked to Kwame one last time. There was no fury in her eyes now, only the deep sorrow of a soul lost between worlds. And then, nothing. Kwame watched as the curse settled into her being, the fireflies' glow dimming to a sickly flicker. It was done. Amina's final act was one of pure fury. Her anger, once held in check by the confines of the bottle, now poured out like a floodgate broken open. The ground shook as her rage filled the night air. From the forest, strange sounds echoed. The spirits of the dead awakened by her unrest. The village, still unaware of the horrors to come, began to tremble beneath the weight of the curse she unleashed. The fireflies, once beautiful and serene, danced violently in the air like small burning embers of a dying flame. Amina's wrath was a storm, a fire that consumed all in its path. The trees bowed as though they feared the wind. The villagers could feel the change. The very land seemed to mourn. And then the first scream sounded, a cry of terror as the fireflies descended, clinging to skin, burning with the searing heat of vengeance. Kwame, alone under the night sky, knelt in the dust, his hands trembling. He could feel it in the air. The shift, the spirit of vengeance that Amina had long harbored, was now a force to be reckoned with. He had made the choice to protect the village, to prevent further suffering. But in doing so, he had sentenced Amina to a death she could not escape. "What have I done?" he whispered into the winds. "Was this the right path? To choose duty over love?" His heart ached. In the quiet of the night, there was no one to offer answers, no wise elder to guide him. Only the echoes of his decision, now reverberating through the village, and the whisper of the wind that seemed to mock him. The spirits that had once whispered of his great destiny now seemed to recoil in judgment. Was he too late to undo what had been done? In the heart of the village, the elders gathered. Their faces were heavy, filled with the weight of their own choices. Some spoke in hushed tones, others in silence, but the guilt was unmistakable. Amina's fate, the curse that now gripped the land, it was their fault too. They had ignored the warning signs, turning away when she cried for justice. Greed, ambition, jealousy. They had driven her into the arms of darkness. One elder, his voice cracked with regret, spoke out. "We were blind. We allowed her pain to fester. We gave her the power, believing it would serve us. But the magic we sought was never meant to be ours." The villagers shifted uneasily. The blame had fallen not just on Kwame, but on them all. Their own hands had shaped the curse, and now the consequences would come. The fireflies' light was now darker, like tiny embers caught in a storm. The elders, gathering wisdom from the stories of old, spoke to the villagers. "In the past, we've seen the power of the spirits used in ways we could not control. There's always a price for meddling with forces greater than us. We thought we could control the magic, that we could control our destiny. But the price of unchecked power is death, not just of the body, but of the soul." The villagers listened, but the words came too late. Amina's curse was upon them now, and no amount of regret could turn back the hands of fate. It was a lesson learned too late, and the village would never be the same. As the villagers reflected on their past actions, long-hidden truths began to unravel. Secrets that had festered for years now came to light, poisoning the fragile peace that had once held the community together. A man who had once been Amina's lover spoke of betrayal, of how he had abandoned her when she needed him most. Another elder, once revered, confessed that he had secretly aided in the magic that bound her father's spirit. Each revelation added fuel to the fire, tearing apart the unity that had defined the village. Tensions swelled, distrust rising like a storm cloud. The curse, it seemed, had awakened more than just Amina's vengeance. It had awakened the darker sides of those who had once called themselves protectors. Amina, her body now a twisted shell of its former self, faced the truth. The wrath of her vengeance had consumed her, body and soul. But as the last remnants of her humanity clung to her, she faced one final choice. Could she undo what had been done? Could she choose forgiveness over anger? Her once vibrant eyes were now hollow, lost in a storm of confusion. The curse had taken everything from her, her power, her beauty, her humanity. But in her final moments, she had one last chance to seek redemption. "Is there hope for me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The village stood at the crossroads, divided in spirit. Some, angered by the loss of their loved ones to Amina's wrath, called for her destruction. Others, moved by the tragedy of her fate, sought to heal the wounds of the past. But the tension was palpable, as no one could agree on what was the right path. Some believed the only way forward was to seek vengeance, to punish those who had been complicit in Amina's curse. Others, weary from the battle, believed the only way forward was forgiveness and peace. But the village had lost something far greater than their peace. It had lost its unity. Kwame, his heart heavy, walked alone through the village, the weight of his decision pressing on him. His choice had forever altered the course of the village, but he knew there was no turning back. The pain of Amina's loss lingered, but so too did the quiet resolve that peace, even in its most difficult form, could only be achieved by facing the truth. To move forward, he would need to confront the ghosts of the past, his father's actions, the villagers' sins, and his own guilt. Only then could he begin the healing process, not just for himself, but for the village he had sworn to protect. The future was uncertain, but with each step, Kwame felt the weight of his decision lessen, knowing that peace could only be found through reconciliation with the past. As the sun dipped low, its orange light spread across the village. Kwame stood alone on the outskirts, looking out over the land he had once called home. The weight of his decisions, those he had made with good intentions, but which had led to a devastating end, pressed upon him. He had watched Amina, once vibrant and full of hope, fall deeper into the grip of vengeance. Now she was gone, and the village, too, was haunted by her wrath. He sighed, long and heavy, his chest tight with regret. His thoughts spiraled, circling the same truths again and again. Had he done the right thing? The image of Amina's twisted face, marked by anger and sorrow, flashed in his mind. His heart clenched. Amina had been a victim of her own pain, but so had the village, each one complicit in her fall. And now, none of them could escape what had happened. Kwame shook his head slowly, words muttering from his lips, but none of them seemed enough to capture the weight of what had occurred. "We were all trapped," he whispered. He had thought Amina's wrath was the source of the village's suffering, but the truth was darker. Her vengeance had fed on their fears, their greed, their desires for power, and now the village itself lay fractured, bound by the curse she had left behind. Amina's soul had been torn apart, but so too had their lives. The once peaceful rhythms of daily life had become clouded with guilt and suspicion. Everyone had known, yet no one had acted, waiting, hoping, praying for someone else to solve the problem. But vengeance had a way of consuming all, not just the victim, but everyone who stood too close. Kwame sat, the ground beneath him hard and unyielding, but not as hard as the truth he had to face. How could he have betrayed the trust of those who depended on him? His actions had sent ripples through the lives of those around him. They had broken promises, lost faith, and now the consequences rang in every corner of the village. He thought back to the days when love had been simple, when his heart was clear. But love, when twisted by betrayal, became something dangerous. His choices, made in haste and fear, had woven a web of pain. He could see the faces of those he had hurt, the family members who'd hoped for protection, the friends who had sought understanding. Every smile had been shadowed by doubt, and in the end, his choices had only led them all deeper into darkness. In his quiet reflection, something shifted within Kwame. He saw her, not as the woman consumed by rage, but as the girl who had once laughed and played under the same sun. What had happened to her? Her decisions had been shaped by loss, by the deep wounds inflicted on her soul, by those she trusted. The pain of her past had clouded her judgment, just as his own choices had been colored by the village's desires. Amina had been a victim of a world that demanded too much and gave too little. She had fought for justice, but in the end, it had been her own torment that had taken over. Was there ever a way back for her, or had the cycle of pain broken her beyond repair? Kwame's heart ached as he saw that perhaps it had been the village's collective blindness that had allowed the curse to fester and grow. "What have we done?" Kwame asked aloud, though no one was there to answer. The village, like Amina, had been burdened by its wrongs. The weight of those unspoken words, the promises never kept, the actions never taken, all had led them here, to this moment. How could they heal when the air was thick with resentment? He thought of the villagers who had stood by and watched. They had all turned their faces away, too scared to confront the truth. And now, with Amina's curse hanging over them, forgiveness seemed impossible. How could they forgive themselves for letting this happen? Could the wounds of the past ever be healed? The truth was darker than any curse. The village had built its own prison, brick by brick, from the guilt of their choices. Each day they had turned their eyes from the truth, each moment of inaction only adding to the walls of their self-imposed confinement. They had told themselves that they were innocent, that they had no part in Amina's downfall. But in truth, the village had been complicit in every choice, every hurt. Their silence had fed her rage, and now it was their silence that kept them chained. Walking through the village, Kwame saw the faces of his people, but he no longer recognized them. The village that had once been filled with laughter, the sound of life, was now quiet and withdrawn. The guilt was a weight on everyone's shoulders. I thought I was protecting them, Kwame thought, but I was only feeding the fire. It was his choices that had started this, his belief that he could control everything. But in trying to save the village, he had only deepened its suffering. The fire of vengeance had burned all of them, and now it was his turn to face the cost. There would be no escaping it, no way to turn back the clock. As Kwame stood in the center of the village, something inside him clicked. Forgiveness wasn't just about releasing others from their wrongs. It was about freeing himself from the chains that had bound him. The chains of guilt, of fear, of anger. Only through forgiveness could they, truly begin to heal. The villagers had been trapped for so long, but now Kwame saw the truth. Forgiveness was the key to unlocking the door to their future. It begins with me, he thought. And so, he stepped forward, ready to do what had to be done. Kwame stood before the villagers, the weight of his realization heavy on his heart. "We cannot move forward until we let go of the past," he declared, his voice steady but filled with the weight of his journey. "It is not enough to mourn what we've lost. We must forgive, for only then can we truly find peace." The words hung in the air, and Kwame could see the flicker of understanding in the eyes of those around him. They, too, had been waiting for someone to take the first step, and now that step had been taken. The path to healing lay open before them, but only if they had the courage to follow. As the fireflies began to fill the night sky, Kwame watched their glowing bodies dance in the dark. "This is the light we've been waiting for," he thought. The light that could pierce through the darkness of revenge. It was not a bright, blinding light, but a soft, gentle glow, a symbol of the hope that still remained. As the fireflies scattered, he knew that the village's journey had begun. Redemption was not an easy road, but it was one worth walking, and with each step they took, the light of forgiveness would shine brighter. Days passed, and the village slowly began to heal. It wasn't quick. It wasn't easy. But each person took a step toward healing, toward forgiveness. They began to speak openly, to share their pain and their guilt, and in doing so, they found a new strength. The walls of resentment that had divided them for so long began to crumble. Love returned, as if it had been waiting all along for them to be ready. Kwame's mind lingered on the words he had said that day. The souls trapped in the bottle may have been freed, but the ones left behind were still imprisoned. It was the truth that had been hidden from them all, The souls of the village had been imprisoned, but now, as the fireflies scattered and the night grew quiet, the village's true light had begun to shine. It was a light of forgiveness, of redemption, and of renewal. And in that light, Kwame saw that the future was not yet written, but it was one they could all shape together.